Long ago, in the centuries before time was measured by clocks, days were calculated by observing the position of the stars and the moon in the night sky. These calculations had become an obsession of an ancient king named Vertumnus, who spent his life studying these, looking for signs announcing summer's return. He was desperate as summer had been banished in his kingdom as a result of a goddess whom had once been his queen. The kingdom became increasingly impoverished with the lack of a warm sun to harvest crops and cultivate livestock. Vertumnus was a venerated warrior whose bow and arrow had valiantly fought against the soldiers of the sun god Sol. In the days before the seasons, Earth's summer, fall, winter, and spring were decided by a great battle fought in a never-ending war between the kingdoms of Earth and the mighty fire soldiers commanded by Sol. If Earth won a battle, Sol was forced to give more light and heat to Earth. But if Sol was victorious, Earth was destined to plunge into a dark and long winter. Victory often came to Vertumnus because of his skill as an archer. As he fought Sol, he learned of his vulnerabilities. Vertumnus knew that depending on the positions of the stars and where he stood on Earth, he could defeat Sol at least half the time. This made it possible for summer to be somewhere on Earth. But Vertumnus was a mortal king, while Sol was an immortal god. Either Vertumnus must pass down his knowledge of Sol and his skilled archery to a son he did not have, or find the secrets leading to immortality. One day before the start of the cold winter, Sol had summoned Vertumnus with a proposition. He would stop the war of the seasons and give Earth his summer heat on a regular basis if Vertumnus would find him a wife. He was to find an earthly woman who would agree to become a celestial goddess and serve as Sol's consort. Vertumnus agreed to Sol's proposition. Married to King Vertumnus was the beautiful Queen Diana, whom he had confided Sol's proposition. Diana appealed to Vertumnus not to trust Sol, as there was no assurance that Sol would honor his pledge. But Vertumnus was desperate as winter approached, and without a victory against Sol, summer would not appear without another battle. Vertumnus approached Diana's unmarried sister Aurora. Aurora told Vertumnus that she would accept Sol's proposition and become his wife. Vertumnus, relieved, instructed Aurora to be on the steps of the kingdom's castle at sunrise the next morning. She must wear a white lace wedding scarf around her head. Aurora had no intention of accepting Sol's proposition, as this was an opportunity for her to claim Diana's throne and proclaim herself as queen. She decided to deceive Diana by sending a note to her asking to borrow her wedding scarf, as she wanted to attend a party wearing it. The note said to meet her tomorrow at sunrise on the steps of the kingdom's castle. Aurora didn't receive a reply, as it was customary to send one. She wasn't sure if Diana would come. As the darkness of the early morning turned to dawn, the day's sunrise was only a few minutes away. Aurora arrived at the steps of the castle and decided to wait for Diana. As long as she didn't have the requested scarf, she believed nothing would happen to her. As the sun's rays began to turn the dark sky blue, Aurora could see a figure approaching towards the steps. Being cautious as not to confuse Sol which woman would be his wife, she walked down to the lower landing. Sunrise was less than a few minutes away, and when Diana appeared at the top of the steps, she called out to Aurora. The sun started to peek over the distant mountains. Diana started to walk towards her sister with her scarf in her hand. She stopped to look at the oncoming daybreak, then continued to walk towards Aurora. At the moment the sun rose above the mountain ridge, Diana started to glow and began to rise towards the sky. Aurora screamed out to her sister as she became overwhelmed with regret. Vertumnus arrived a moment too late to stop his wife's transformation. Diana had been transformed into a goddess, something she did not want. When she reached the edges of the sun, she told Sol she did not agree to marry him and had been deceived by her sister. Sol was angered by this deception and refused to send any of his heat or light to Vertumnus's kingdom, despite losing any future battle against him. As a result of this action, Vertumnus was devastated with anguish by what had happened and never again attacked Sol. His kingdom was now entrenched in a sea of ice and cold, and except for a few months of the year, it was in total darkness. His kingdom would become known as the North Pole. For refusing Sol's hand in marriage, Diana was banished to the moon where she could reign for eternity. Her first command was to exact revenge on Aurora for her deception. After Aurora's life, she would return in spirit circling the kingdom as a reminder of her grave misdeed. All in the kingdom would know of Aurora as the Northern Lights. As for Vertumnus, he would never recover from his anguish for accepting Sol's proposition. After his life, he would transform into an eternal wind that would encircle his kingdom, something that is known today as the polar vortex. When someone looks up and sees the Northern Lights dancing across the night sky, they see the eternal struggle of King Vertumnus's efforts to banish Aurora from his kingdom. And so now, you know the story of the War of the Seasons,